Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Street Apologists Live. Very special broadcast. Vocab Malone, I'm your host, Christian urban apologist, sitting in with a fellow Christian apologist, Jeff Cran. And today we're going to talk about the Holocaust Museum, which I recently went to. And Jeff also has some experience with Holocaust museums and these types of memorial things. And they offer an important opportunity and chance for Christians to analyze history through a biblical lens and just think through some challenging issues. That's what we're going to do here today on Street Apologists Live, where we serve the underserved and look into the overlooked. Let's go.
Good.
How y'all doing? Vocab checking in with Jeff Cran. Jeff Cran, say what's up to the people.
Good afternoon.
So how you feeling about this new microphone we got for you?
Pretty good.
Yeah? How you feeling about your lighting?
I'm feeling good about my lighting.
How you feel about the nicer chair I let you sit in, and I'm in a stool?
I have the Wakanda chair. I do.
It actually is. This is, if you guys could see this, the supporters enabled me to have this. And it's got the Black Panther designs and everything, but Jeff may not... Oh, I'll fix it. He may not know, but I have the Wakanda stool, which sounds interesting in and of itself. Don't worry, I'll get plugged back in here. Sometimes there's some challenges when you got two people in the studio, as we do today. And I gave Jeff a call after I got back from D.C., and I said, Jeff, I went to the Holocaust Museum in D.C., and he said, oh, and then we had this very interesting conversation. And I said, we should do a program about this and talk about what we talked about. So let's do it.
All right.
So, Jeff, let's briefly talk first about if someone said, you as a Jewish Messianic Christian, what was the Holocaust? And then we'll talk about Holocaust museums and memorials.
Well, that was basically the attempted genocide that Hitler attempted. I want to be a little careful because there were German folks that were just nice German folks that got sucked into the whole thing. Because really, if you were in Nazi Germany and you decided to hide Jews, not only did they get found, but your family and you could get a free trip to a concentration camp, all expenses paid.
So Corey, like the Ten Boom family, Corey Ten Boom, the hiding place, that's an example where people know where they're hiding folks away from Nazis, right? And so the Holocaust was something that left an indelible mark upon really the world, but especially maybe we call it the Jewish consciousness, as it should.
Yeah, it sure did. I mean, it's one of the major events. You have the Babylonian captivity, you have Rome, and then you have the Holocaust. So those are major events.
So as a Christian, as an apologist, I know this isn't necessarily the area you specialize in, but you've talked and thought about this. Well, how do discussions go? What are some things you've learned? I'd be curious to kind of, what is it like when you discuss this subject?
Well, for me, it fueled my real interest in the issue of the problem of evil and God.
Okay.
I mean, the interest was there, but it really got fueled because around the table with like my grandparents, it was, why did God tolerate this? Why did God allow it? How do we have a good God? How do we process this? And so it's a major sort of question that comes up, particularly with secular Jews.
Yeah, and you mentioned that. Here's something from Mount Zion Publications. You said Al Katz. This is actually my book, but I showed it to Jeff, and he was more familiar with the author than I was. Al Katz wrote this, The Holocaust, Where Was God? And so this is a Christian perspective, Christian Jewish perspective. And I think it's a helpful little booklet, for example, written in 1998. And he definitely had a more biblical answer than let's say somebody like the gentleman who wrote the book, Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People? Sorry, my Calvinism slipped out there for a second. Why do bad things happen to good people? And what was his answer, Jeff?
Well, his problem was that, his answer was essentially God has bad hair days.
As in, he didn't see that one quite coming, huh? He didn't see that one coming, right? What was the author's name of that again?
That was Harold Kirshner.
All right, yeah, Harold Kirshner. And there's been other Jewish folks who basically said, "Well, this is all the Christians' fault." Right? There's a little bit of that.
There is some of that because the way it was kind of billed, actually, the Nazi soldiers had a belt that in German said "God wills it." Mm-hmm. So they tried to create a "God's on our side" sort of feel to it.
Right. We already got a couple of comments. Let's see here. Saint Anne says, "Whoa, this is going to be deep. God bless you at Vocab alone." He probably didn't know you were joining yet because this is before he left one of the first comments. And so I also imagine he would also want to say, "God bless Jeff Grant." And then we've also got shout out to Nate. Shout out to D New. You know those folks, don't you?
Oh, I sure do. It's good to see them.
Oh, yes, it is. Zorady Ortiz says, Vocab, were Muslims involved in the Holocaust? Now, this isn't top of the show, but do you want to say anything briefly about that?
Yeah, the Mufti was quite chummy. The Mufti of Jerusalem was quite chummy with Adolf Hitler.
And there's a famous picture of them hanging out.
Yeah.
David Wood posted that picture on Facebook, and guess what happened? Got in trouble for hate speech. That's why he got off of his account eventually. Because he said, if I can't post this picture and criticize it, then, it's like, what good is this? And so he got off Facebook rather than, deal with that kind of thing anymore because he posted that famous picture. Mike B says, are Vocab and Jeff talking about the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C.? The answer is yes, because I recently visited there and I have some pictures and videos I'm going to show you guys. But we're using it as a springboard to talk broader as a Christian as a pair of Christian apologists about the issue itself. This is a little more probably of a historical kind of basic discussion. Obviously, there's going to be theology involved, as you can already tell. But we're really going to say, hey, here's some things that happen. Here's some things you should know about. And just have a kind of a very friendly discussion between the two of us to really kind of re-inform people, because I know a little something about it. But when I went to the Holocaust Museum, I also realized how much I didn't know about the Holocaust. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to learn there. Now, talk a little bit about, before we talk about specifically the one in D.C., can you talk about some other similar memorials and maybe their distinctive flavors, some other similar museums? Because this is somewhat of a recent phenomenon that some of these have been popping up. I'm not saying there's never been memorials or monuments prior, but the museum experience is a little more recent, isn't it?
Well, there's one connected with Eli Wiesel in California that when I was in my master's program, we actually did a field trip and went to view. Not as extensive as Washington and a little different in its flavor. Mm-hmm. And then, older, probably, certainly older than Washington, is Yad Vashem in Israel.
Which means the hand in the name?
A hand in a name, yeah.
Okay, and you did visit that one, right?
I did visit that when I went to Israel.
Can you talk a little about that? Because I haven't been to this one, so you and I talked about it, but I'd love you to tell people about this one.
Yad Vashem was quite an experience. I'll talk about some of the things that hit me. First of all, one of the things I love about Yad Vashem is that there's an Isle of the Righteous Gentiles, which includes a tree planted for the Ten Booms, for some of the other folks that helped. And so the feel at Yad Vashem is very much that there were Christians, or they might say Gentiles, who were not a part of this, who were exceptions to this, and attention is drawn to that. We have the boat, one of the boats that the Danish used to help evacuate Jews, and so that's really kind of neat and something I really appreciated, because it was flavored kind of like we're not blaming this on Christianity per se.
Right. Or on Gentiles as a whole or something like that.
Right. And so that was kind of nice too. And the trees have some information about those folks. The other thing is they do a ceremony at Yad Vashem. I don't think they do it at Washington, where Gentiles who saved Jewish people during that time period were honored They were given a little medallion with a quote from the Talmud that says, "He who saves one life, it is as if he saved the world."
Which, by the way, is a Talmudic phrase that Muhammad ripped off and put into the Quran. And it's fascinating that you hear a lot of people be like, "Oh, look, I forget if it's a hadith. It might be a hadith, but basically use that." And the funny thing is that people quote it to show how peaceful and good Islam is, but which is fine to an extent, but it's something that's from the origin of it. It's not even an Islamic source. It's just kind of fascinating. But okay, so what else could you say about that? Were you there when they had some of these folks there?
Yeah, we were actually there when they were doing his ceremony. Now, when we came out, it was pretty close to over, but we caught the tail end of that. And so that was a really cool experience. And that's more something that I don't think Washington does, and I don't think Eli Wiesel does that either.
Now, you said the Holocaust... he was soured on God by it, basically, right?
Yeah, the Holocaust, and maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but from my experience in the discussions with my grandparents, the Holocaust made Jews who were observant more observant and made Jews who were less. In other words, it either hardened Jews, and we get a certain number of older Jewish atheists from it, or it pulled them into position where they kind of drew closer to what they knew of God. I'm not going to say that it made believers out of them. I'll just say that, what it did do is pull some Jews, it softened some and hardened others. That's kind of where I'll go with that.
Here we are, Surah 5:32. For what cause we decreed for the children of Israel, that whosoever killeth a human being for other than manslaughter or corruption in earth, it shall be as if he had killed all mankind. And whoso saveth the life of one, it shall be as if he had saved the life of all mankind. Our messengers came unto them of old with clear proofs of Allah's sovereignty, but afterwards, lo, many of them became prodigals in the earth. That's Surah 5:32, and that's from the Pickthall translation. And I just say that because it's interesting. Sometimes when you hear people say, well, look how peaceful it is, and they'll quote that verse, which again, I like that it's in there. Okay, that's a good thing, but it's just funny. It's like, yeah, this verse you're quoting is from a non-Islamic source. I'm glad it made it to the Quran, but you should recognize that, especially if there's an element of, we're not big fans of Jews in our religion, which let's just tell an anecdotal story today. So today, on the way here, right, I say, hey, let's stop by Romanelli's. And Romanelli's, we're not in New York City, so there's not a ton of Italian delis here, right? And Romanelli's is one of the few Italian delis within the city limits. There's some in Scottsdale. I never visited those or whatever. I think it's like a different clientele. But Romanelli's is established way back in the 70s, 35th and Dunlap here in Phoenix, Arizona, right? And so we go in there, and I'm showing Jeff around, and Jeff is actually more familiar with deli food. He like knows all these little things, and he's like, so he was telling me things I didn't know about, right? And then I would show him some things, say, check this out, check this out. Then we got some spumani. It was a good time was had by all, right?
Yes.
And the passive voice, get nicked for that. And so I got some spumani, got some garlic bread, got a flag. I forgot what else we got. We got a couple of Pellegrino, the juices or whatever. And then I was talking to the guy who was checking us out, and it's a pretty decent sized place. It's a store. They have imported goods. It's a deli. They got the cheeses, right? So there's a lot there. So there's a good amount of employees. So I was kind of joking around with the guy, and I was asking him like which of the employees were actual Italians, any Sicilians, who's who, and the guy behind the counter, he's like, well, I'm. Well, maybe at this point I can let you tell the story. So what happened after that, Jeff?
So he says he's Jordanian.
Well, the one owner guy, but the guy at the counter, he's from Iraq.
Oh, that's right.
Remember?
Yeah, he was from Iraq.
And he's like, well, I'm Arabic. I'm from Iraq, and
so Vocab mentions that I'm Jewish. He said, well, you're like my enemy. as we're getting ready to check out, it was almost like, you really want to say that before we pay for these goods?
Yeah, and so the guy at the counter is actually from Iraq, and I tell him, yeah, I'm showing my Jewish deli friend an Italian deli, right? And he's like, oh, well, you're my enemy. He says that to Jeff. And it was like kind of joking, but it's kind of not joking. And Jeff later says, well, not why I'm buying your stuff, I'm not. It's like, do you want us to put this back? I thought that was so, and we leave, and we're in an Italian deli, and we get assalamu alaikum as we leave. And I said shalom to him. I should have said ciao, but maybe I should have said shalom ciao or something, combine.
Throw some Italian in there.
Combine it all together. But that was the funniest thing. It's like, bro, what? Well, you're like my enemy. Well, what? Anyway, so I had to remind Jeff, which he quickly knew when he saw all the pork products, that this was not quite a kosher deli. Although I think the spumani was kosher.
The spumani was kosher. I didn't see a lot of smoked fish, so I knew it wasn't a Jewish deli.
Right. Or what's the one with the funny name? Gefilte fish?
Oh, gefilte fish. Yeah.
Gefilte fish. Yeah. But we had a good time, and my spumani's still in the freezer, so we'll get that. But I got off a little off track there, but I think I was somehow getting about anti-Semitism in the Quran or something like that, and there we go there. Anyways. What else do we want to say before we start showing some pictures? And maybe what you and I can do is I'm going to go to my Instagram. I'm going to show some pictures, and then we'll just kind of run some commentary and discuss these things as we do it. Does that sound good?
It sounds real good, and it was interesting to look to see if the pictures were a lot like Yad Vashem or if they were a lot like the Weizel Museum.
Right.
And they had some here that I had not remembered seeing.
Right. Okay. Now, this is going to take just a second here because I need to put us on the screen as well. So I want to have us here be on here. Okay. I just got to line everything up here, and then I want to make this larger so you can get a good sense of what it is. We'll start in the beginning here. This will be the first. So that's going to be, so it's directly from Instagram. So that's how it's going to be. So you can see these if you want to see them more. Instagram.com/Vocab Alone. And then I'll put us here somewhat large as well. Just doing the formatting on the fly. Nothing to see here. No big deal. And yeah. I think that this works. Okay, what do you think, bro? Is that a good little? Okay, here we go. So let's start. So I'll read the quote and then comment here. This is in the very beginning, and this is Dwight Eisenhower. He's the leader, of course, of the American, I guess you could say Allied forces, but really the American forces. I don't know how to, whatever you want to add or say. But he later, of course, became president. I like Ike. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, April 15, 1945. Listen to what he says here. The things I saw beggar description. The visual evidence and the verbal testimony of starvation, cruelty, and bestiality were overpowering. I made the visit deliberately in order to be in a position to give first-hand evidence of these things. If ever, in the future, there develops a tendency to charge these allegations merely to, quote, propaganda. I love that quote. It was kind of prophetic, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a great quote, and it's interesting that Ike wanted to be able to give firsthand as opposed to relying upon the testimony of troops.
Yeah, I like that he did that. And you look here, and let me make this even just a little bit bigger here. You look, and in the bottom, you can't exactly see it very well on here, but you can kind of. You see there at the bottom, it's when they're coming in and they're seeing firsthand with the troops what was in these camps, because there was obviously an idea. Hey, there's some some funny business going on, right? Is kind of a euphemistic way to say it, but it seems like the extent I don't think was fully understood. The extent I don't think was fully understood as far as these camps went.
I think Germany was viewed as a highly civilized nation. Remember, people would say things like, this is the nation of Bach. or a Beethoven, and it was a little hard to grasp that this sort of thing could actually go on.
That the civilized could
Yeah.
be so uncivilized.
Yeah.
With such intent. Such intent as well. It's like this wasn't an accidental thing. I'm just messing with the shape of the thing here. So I think that's a powerful quote. I thought that was a good quote and very, very prophetic in a sense, unfortunately. And so there was a command, is my understanding, for the Americans to document, photograph, video everything they could when they went into these camps.
I knew a gentleman that helped release a camp. I mean, he was there. And
An American soldier?
An American soldier, yeah. He was, and he brought back, pictures. He brought back stuff. He created a little museum in his basement, as I recall.
Oh, really?
With some of the paraphernalia that he, and things that he was able to bring back.
That's fascinating. It's tragic, but this is also, it's interesting, but it's just also just horrific what we're talking about. What Jeff, the cover image to this program, which we had commented on briefly before we started. What is I'm showing you on the phone. Can you tell people the thumbnail to this live stream is what?
Those are the actual ovens. I mean, the physical evidence of the Holocaust is undeniable.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the actual ovens. The Germans did a better job at documenting than we did. They left documentation behind. That's what's so silly to me when someone, questions. It's not even our stuff. Some of this documentation is stuff they documented.
Actually, I have we're going to get to that. Keep that thought, because I'm going to, in the future, one of the last slides, I have this German photographer who's the source of a lot of the images, and that's a fascinating little tale in itself. Okay, so going to the next one. So it begins right away with the Americans encountering the camps, right? And what it says here is, American troops discovered the charred remains of prisoners when they liberated do you know this word? OHRDRUF?
I'm not seeing it.
It's OHRDRUF. It's a city in Germany.
Oh, okay.
Orfdorf concentration camp in central Germany, April 1945. National Archives and Records Administration, College Park, Maryland. Now, this is actually one of the very first things you see when you step off the elevator, and I have a video of the elevator. We're going to talk about that in a second here. So if you are sensitive, you might want to turn away soon here. I think it's the next slide. I think it's the next slide where it's a close-up of this, because this is just a little placard I'm showing. But, yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. So this isn't the only charred corpse in the picture, but I knew I wanted to get a close-up of one of them. So I felt a little odd doing it, but I said, I need to do this, And so this is my own little way to document things, I guess, in a sense. And I zoomed in there and got the picture of this, and it was very big right when you stepped off the elevator. I got the sense is they wanted to shock you right when you got off and bring you into the sense of this is going to be a sobering experience, this museum. Because after that, you weren't thrown immediately into grisly stuff, and the rest of it they kind of shielded, but this was purposely, I think, put there in the beginning to make you realize, boom,
Yeah, they wanted the transition probably to indicate you're not in Kansas anymore, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, continue on here. Now this was these are the stats we can get for Jewish population before and after the Holocaust, I believe is what it is. All over the world. So you see in North Africa, you have stats from Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, Southern Europe, Scandinavia, Western Eastern Europe. I couldn't even get it all, but it's like this, the population. Or I'm sorry, I think I said it wrong, Jeff. I think what I said is before and after. I think what this is the percentage in each country or place of the Jewish population at that time. I think that's what it was, because I knocked off the top of this. But I think that's what it was. Do you see that? It's just to get a sense of it. These are, this stuff isn't made up.
No, and I noticed a chat by someone from Lithuania, and my family would have hailed from Belarus, which isn't even listed because I don't think Belarus was a separate place at the time.
Probably, but I also don't have everywhere on here. I couldn't fit it all in my little picture.
And then you have Ukrainia or Ukrainia.
Yeah. Poland, Soviet Union, Romania, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. Yeah, my grandfather, this is a brother in the Instagram comment. My grandfather fled Rakashak, Lithuania. His whole family and extended family, all the Lithuanian Jews were killed either in their home synagogues or in the streets and forests. And then they have a little debate there, of course, because the Hebrew Israelites, of course, a lot of them have a different perspective on the Holocaust. And this was pretty quick, and I thought this was a very stark picture. First of all, these guys look like they're not messing around. Second of all, they're pretty sharply dressed. The Nazis went out of the way to be kind of sharp with their style. And, you immediately see the state-sponsored violence against the Jews. And I thought that picture was very telling, Anything to say about that? We're going to get into Bloody Sunday and the Week of Blood and some other things there. But comment on that? Maybe
not too much. Do you notice the German Shepherd there is muzzled?
Yeah.
There's a reason for that because he's got really pointy teeth and he's not afraid to use them.
Right. So he can become unmuzzled. They talk about the SS and the SA. So you go and these are like these big images like behind glass. You got people. They're checking for their papers and stuff like that. That kind of thing. Is what's going on and theirs. And look at this. This is fascinating. The way the propaganda was that they were protecting themselves against the Jews. Germans, defend yourselves against Jewish atrocity propaganda. Buy only at German shops.
Now, you got to look at the irony of that from the standpoint of like a European. Mm-hmm. It's just really kind of ironic to me. The answer is stay away from the Jews who hail from an entirely different part of the world, say the Mideast, and buy from Europeans, particularly like Western Europeans. It's just kind of funny.
Yeah, defend yourselves. So who's the victim here, Jeff?
Yeah. Oh, it's very deliberately worded. And, that's not something you wouldn't expect.
So, if this was all it was boycotting, okay, right? But that's not all. This is the beginning of these things, right? And Nazi propaganda, you got schoolgirls reading Nazi books, and you got Heil Hitler, They were good at using propaganda, especially the media, weren't they?
They were scary. When I was at Yad Vashem, I saw a science book, and it entirely wove eugenics into the whole science book. So you couldn't separate the plain biology from the eugenics.
Right. And eugenics is sort of a pseudo-science based upon racial characteristics about who's superior and inferior.
Yeah.
Margaret Sanger, founder of Planned Parenthood, she was into that too. So this is in the elevator, and when we were in the elevator, I was like, did they purposely make this like a, Oh, and you get a little card with a person in the beginning. So each of you have a person with their bio, which it was a pretty neat little thing there. Which I have mine still. So at the end, let me try to go grab it.
Yeah, that would be neat to see who you got, like what name.
Yeah, I'll grab it at the one that's in there. So, okay, now you've seen these, Jeff. You want to comment before I open up the next one, which is going to be these?
Oh, that one's fascinating. Now, one of the things you need to pay attention to is how Jews were drawn. It was very deliberate.
Right. Well,
so I want you to see.
Here he is. There's the Jewish guy in the bottom. Check out the nose, right?
And they were always drawn. They looked more Mideastern, which is very interesting to me because Hitler understood Jewish people came from the Mideast, i.e., Israel originally. And they understood that perfectly, and so they make him more Mideastern. That's why the long nose, okay? They made them more swarthy in appearance.
Notice he's older, balding, sort of grotesque features, stylized, almost doesn't look like how most real people will look, whatever their ethnicity. You look at his ear and his neck, whereas the German man on the cross,
Yeah.
he's all fit and handsome and got a full head of hair there, right?
Yeah, and I found it fascinating they placed him on the cross.
All right.
Because there's this attempt to place the Aryan sort of as the savior figure in contrast to.
And the idea is, hey, these Jews killed Jesus. They want to kill us. And the bottom translation is the Jew wants to butcher the German people. And notice how there's a bunch of crosses there. I wonder what this says here. I can't read that.
I think... I don't know if it's a last name or a reference to him being German.
Yeah, well, either of those would make sense. Look at the Jew here, Jeff. Children of the devil. The Jews are our disaster. It's translated as. The Jews are our disaster.
Yeah, and I noticed some Italian. It looks like Spanish on the back.
Oh,
You see the other
yeah, there's
side?
different languages, right?
Different languages.
Here's English. The Jews. See that?
The
There's
Jews,
English.
yeah. So they they made it a world issue.
Yeah, so this is from a propagandist paper. My understanding, so it's not like the standard German newspaper per se, but my understanding is this was the most popular propaganda rag at the time.
Okay.
That's my understanding. And so these are these different images from it. From the contents, anti-Semitism in North America, the Jews are our disaster. So this is all from the same publication. Everything will collapse that's built on the lies of the chosen people.
Now that's absolutely fascinating, because the lies of who? Again, the Germans made the connection as to who Jewish people were, but they didn't like them. So that's kind of just an interesting thing from that standpoint.
Yeah, and then there's look at the Jews. He's sort of cowering in the shadows.
He looks like Shylock out of
Yeah.
Merchant of Venice.
Yeah,
And I think that's deliberate.
I think he's got the menorah down there in the bottom. You see that in the bottom right hand corner? It
yeah,
looks like
that's a menorah.
it looks like a money bag.
And he's got the creepy cape and the hand up there, like Count Dracula.
Yeah, they're kind of dehumanizing. Especially, look at this. The books of Judas. The devil wrote these with blood and tears of non-Jews. Look at the way he's he's emerging out of this book, and check him out. He's got the pen in his hand, and he's writing it in blood. And again, not exactly a handsome guy.
Oh yeah, and the bat wings are there.
Oh, I didn't even actually notice that.
Did you notice the bat wings?
Yeah, what is up with the bat wings?
Well, because if you give somebody white fluffy wings, they're an angel, and if they're a demon, of course, they have bat wings.
It's wild. What I wrote here is it's sad and riveting how little anti-Semitic propaganda has changed. I saw these German anti-Semitic newspaper covers of the Holocaust Museum, and their Instagram is at Holocaust Museum. This is all from the images there in D.C. You still can see stuff like this,
Oh yeah,
Let the Goyim believe we are American, English, German, French. In the end, we are always Jews.
Which is, again, interesting, because what the Germans are emphasizing here is the idea that the Jewish people are a foreign or distinct people from the countries they live in. So, again, as far as the Germans were concerned, they clearly understood this was a different ethnic group. And so what they're emphasizing is the same thing Haman emphasized. Here are people that stand apart that are not us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let them think we're these. The Goyim, of course, is Gentiles, non-Jews. But then we're always Jews. The idea is like these wandering people who go from society to society, contributing nothing and just being parasitic upon the host. That's the way they're portrayed as a people, in essence. Whoever defends the Jew is a dupe, not a hero. And I can't tell if the guy in the front is a German or a mistaken American or Brit or something. It seems like he would be a German. And in the background, it looks like a Jew's pointing to those flags. Although, isn't the top one an Italian flag? And I don't know. I'm a little confused. I wish I could see more.
Yeah,
what's going on.
it's not real clear. I mean, the American flag is, the British Union Jack is. Mm-hmm. The other one, it looks if it's colored red, white, and green in that order, it would be an Italian flag.
I wonder if it's a French flag. Wait, does theirs go like this or like this? Because the French is red, white, and blue, I think. I'll just look it up. Hold on real quick.
Yeah.
Siri, show me a French flag.
Here's what I found.
I hope Siri doesn't mistake what I said there. Oh, okay, blue, white, and red. So, yeah, that couldn't be it. You see what I'm saying? I was right about that, but see the order, that's clearly red in the front.
Yeah.
And it's blue, white, and red. So that seems like that's an Italian flag, because I doubt it's a Mexican flag.
No, I don't think it's a Mexican flag.
But hold on, wait a minute.
It could be.
Wait, we should remember, because I just bought the Italian flag today.
Did.
It's green, white, and red. But that's red, white, and green. I don't know, whatever. Anyways, it's just saying don't defend the Jews. That makes you stupid.
Now, what I was wondering is whether it was the major players in the opposing allies as opposed to the, the allied forces.
So it seems like it would be.
Yeah, it seems like it would be. And the idea is that the allies ought to just give up. And
in 1476, Jews in Regensburg murdered 6 boys, drained their blood, tortured them to death.
Blood libel. Very old charge.
Can you tell a little bit about the charge of blood libel?
Blood libel was the charge that Jews actually drank or used the blood of Gentiles, either to make matzah for Passover or in their ceremonies in some way. And that was essentially like the charge of blood libel that, and so that's basically blood libel. It's an old medieval charge that was used, and the Germans just, recycled it.
Yeah, and it's crazy. There's you can still find in some media, like even in the Middle East, some media where sometimes this is still portrayed as a reality. I've seen some examples of that, like on some TV shows and whatnot. All right, so speaking of eugenics, Jeff, these dudes are actually using a caliper, which if you look closely, it's actually there. The caliper is physically there at the museum. I don't know if you can see it, the caliper, to measure the nose to discover if it's a Jew nose. That is really what they're doing in their mind. Using caliper to measure the nose. Because they have to discover who's Aryan, who's alien, who's superior, who's inferior. Comment on this. The caliper to measure the nose. I mean, imagine, this is the way you spend your time as a Nazi, measuring noses.
You've got this great job for the Third Reich. You get to be a nose measurer.
Yeah, I don't know, Jeff. What do you think? Do you think we'd pass or fail? What would...
I don't know. I was kind of fascinated. They were measuring the width of the nose and not the length.
Maybe there's another set for that or something.
Yeah, I'm like, because the caliper seems to be measuring the width.
So not only the nose, but the hair. You see this? You see what they got here? This is a spectrum of hair, and they line it up with you and see where you fall on the spectrum. Less or more pure hair. And here's the eye color selection guide as well. See that on the bottom, everybody?
Now, I want you to know what that would do.
What?
Let's say I'm in Germany, and I want to pass. What characteristics physically would I be more likely to have if I was going to slip under the radar? Well, I'd be lighter skinned, lighter haired, blue eyed. That's why Jews are lighter today than they used to be.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if you guys understand what he's making a very interesting point that I think you were the first person I heard this from. He's saying that there's sort of a lightening of European Jewry, even from what it was, because the more swarthy, darker, more mid-Eastern looking Jews were more quickly discovered. They couldn't pass as well.
Right, essentially. And I think that point was made in a video. And I thought about that point. I thought, that's a really interesting thing to point out, is that, if you're eliminated, you don't have any children. Mm-hmm. So what does that do to the population? Well, it makes certain features more predominant, mm-hmm. and certain features within that population less predominant. Mm-hmm. And we're talking a major part of the Jewish population here. This isn't 10 people. You're talking about going from like, I don't know. It was like 2/3 of the Jewish population almost. Less, but it was getting pretty hefty. So it would skew characteristics.
Yeah, I believe 6 million Jews were killed total.
6 million Jews were killed.
Yeah.
They've never been a huge people group.
Right.
And so, yeah, that would shift things.
Some interesting comments here. Mike B says, thanks for clarifying. I visited the Holocaust Museum during my trip to D.C. in 2016. It was a very powerful experience, so he's been there as well. Andrew Long says, the Japanese did the same level of human experimentation on Chinese people in the 30s as the Nazis did in the 40s. Same is an interesting word. Warrior Woman says, this is the surah Muslims love to quote, yet it was abrogated by a later verse.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
You can't take that on here, but the doctrine of abrogation really changes things.
And that's why Marion says, keep reading, keep reading. And then shout out to Alejandro, by the way. Shout out to Bible Care and Share Fellowship. And then we've also got shout out to Kali Danielle Marie. I'm not sure how to say your first name, sis. Mark Cleveland, shout out to you. He said he loves your channel, by the way. And then he says he misses his channel. He was very thorough. The sad part was that Hitler said, I'm just doing the job. I'm just doing what the church has done, but I'll finish the job. And then Kaliel says, I'm so happy you guys are doing a live today because I couldn't think of what to watch on YouTube all day. Well, here we are. We aim to please. Brother says, proof that an increase in education doesn't necessarily make a society any better. And then we've got Soko says, my father's mother escaped Poland during his time and made it to Brazil. Hence why I'm alive and talking here, and hence why I have the name I do. That's fascinating. Little Lady says, it feels like the hatred of some today would justify a repeat of these atrocities against those they disagree with. E. Mike says, I'm a Catholic Polak, and I've been to Auschwitz 3 times. Still cry every time I go. Well, that's an experience. I'd like to hear more about
that would be even more intense than the museum to actually go see Auschwitz. Yeah.
WW says, I studied this in university and still remember the sadness seeing the real footage and photos. And we'll skip that comment. And someone commenting on eugenics. Shout out to Warrior One for the super chat. Thank you very much. And Moses David Pratt, he's a friendly Hebrew Israelite. Strongly disagree with him about this, but says Genesis 10:2 and 3 Ashkenazi Jews disqualified. 2 Kings 17:24 also called Sephardic Jews. He's basically saying this was an evil perpetrated mistakenly against people who were described in Genesis 10:2 and therefore not really Jews. Is basically what he's saying, and also 2 Kings 17, because he's raised this point to me before. So he's not denying Holocaust. He's denying, like, the people that it happened to.
The Germans thought they had the right people.
Yeah. And then Judah Lion, another somewhat friendly Hebrew Israelite, although he can be a chameleon, says, not cool, Vocab. You give this guy his Jew statuses, yet you leave Judah the Lion out. Shame on me. Well, I measured his nose before. I measured his nose before the show began, and it was obvious. So, what do you want me to do about it? On September 15, 1935, at the annual Nazi Party, sounds like a heck of a time, right, Jeff? Rally in Nuremberg, the German parliament enacted 2 laws that became the centerpiece of Nazi anti-Jewish legislation. Under the Reich citizenship law, only persons of German or kindred blood could claim the new status of Reich citizenship. German Jews remained merely subjects of the state. The law of the protection of German blood and honor banned marriage and sexual relations between Jews and citizens of German or kindred blood as crimes of racial defilement. It also forbade Jews to employ female German house servants under the age of 45. For the first time in history, Jews were subject to persecution not for their religious identity or practices, but solely for their Jewish birth. All persons who were born Jewish were defined as Jews, even if their parents had converted to Christianity. So you could be a Lutheran who is Jew, and it didn't matter. Unlike, not that it's good, but I think the Inquisition was a little different. If you wanted to convert, even if it was, you could essentially kind of escape some level of persecution, and that's where you get the crypto Jews from, right?
Yeah, the funny thing about that was there were a number of Jews who were called Sunday Jews, and they were converts to Lutheranism.
Yeah, so you're talking about within Germany, but
Yeah.
but fascinatingly, it didn't protect them. Is the
No,
point there?
no, it
Because
didn't.
The Nuremberg laws reversed emancipation, a process begun over a century before by which German Jews had achieved full rights of citizenship in the land of their birth. Who was a Jew? With the passage of the Nuremberg laws, the German nation was divided into Aryans and Jews, yet the term Jew remained undefined. Since the laws included measures for criminal prosecution, the need for a clear definition was urgent. By November 14th, 1935, the term Jew embraced two categories. A full Jew was defined as any person with 3 or 4 Jewish, and it actually cuts off there. I couldn't get the full thing, but we're going to show the pictures here in a second. And I'd love to have you comment on this, brother.
Okay, so now we're dealing with... Now, what's interesting with Hitler was grandparents. In other words, they didn't just go to the parent. They went to the grandparents. So if you see the half-breed there...
I'm talking about this is where it says mixed breed.
Yeah, mixed breed.
There's first class and mixed breed second class.
Now, mixed breed first class, you had 2 Jewish grandparents. Mixed breed second class, you had 1 Jewish parent. A Jew was defined as having 3 Jewish grandparents or 4. And so we're not even talking about the parents. Mm-hmm. And then you can see the way they defined it. And it's really kind of arbitrary. You do realize that there's no real basis.
Well, look at this. Marriage permitted only with approval. So at this level, but then marriage permitted only with approval there too. And then look, marriage permitted, children will be mixed breeds. Marriage permitted, children will be Jews. Marriage permitted, children will be Jews. Over here, though, mixed breed second class, you've got marriage permitted in this instance, and the children considered to be German blood, but here it's prohibited, and then permitted only approval, marriage permitted. But so it's a whole thing there, and then they got these charged for Jews as well. Special cases relating to mixed breeds first class. So this is really the Nuremberg laws. Like, this is the way they broke it down. You know, they had this sign, but they had it in English. I'm sorry, in German. But I took a picture of the English translation of it. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, this is. Well, the crazy thing is though, you know, in America, they had America had miscegenation laws, and there's lots of places where if you were considered black, you couldn't marry someone who was white.
Oh yeah, no, we want to be fair about this.
Yeah.
And there were internment camps in this country for the Japanese,
and some people forget it was to a lesser extent. There were some Italians, especially first generation, who were persecuted during this time as well. Not as much as Japanese, and I believe there were some Germans who were as well, is my understanding.
Well, there was some feeling about, but we had a fairly high German population in this country by that time.
Yeah, because that went back really all the way to the sort of prior to even the founding. Now, the Italians in general came over later, and the Japanese were even newer, so they were especially suspicious. And honestly, you could sort of pick out Japanese sort of easier than German and to a certain extent Italian. And so round them up, throw them in Utah. I mean, that's what really happened. So continuing on here. I mean, this is all tragic stuff. Not good, but it's important to understand and learn about. And since I visited, this is a little more of a historical kind of apologetic show. It's not. It's information I think is relevant, especially because we deal with Hebrew Israelism, problem of evil, so it's relevant. I think they had this whole racialized chart here, and you have to see it up close. I did a panel, but it reminded me of some of the Hebrew Israelite charts I see. To be honest, you seen stuff like this before, though, Jeff?
Stuff like that in particular?
Yeah, I just
not that particular chart. I just find it fascinating that they picked a few characteristics. Say like well, let's just name it. Like the Hebrew Israelites, where skin color becomes this overriding sort of characteristic. Mm-hmm. And they did much the same thing. It's very arbitrary. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mass obsession here. So I got kind of a close-up here on the chart there.
It's interesting, too, that you see the old names for the division of humankind.
When you say old names, what do you mean?
Go over to the other panel. No, the other side. On the other side of the picture. You have Orientalist.
Oh, yeah. Like, oh, yeah, it's for the Albanians.
Yeah.
I think it was.
So, they're breaking down finer. Notice, too, Southern Europeans were not considered Aryans.
Yeah.
So your Albanians, your...
Italians, Greeks.
Well, your Greeks, remember that, Mussolini cuts a deal for a little while.
Oh, so they got to be included?
Hitler liked to do this second status thing, where you're not quite Aryan, but you're like, friend of the court.
Is that the Italians at the time?
Yeah. Now, you pointed out something very important. The anti-Semitism didn't work well in Italy because Italy had a very old Jewish community,
right,
and there were strong relationships there.
Despite The Merchant of Venice.
Well, that was actually written by Shakespeare.
No, I know what I'm just saying because of the story.
Yeah.
But we're going to actually, I'm going to show that little slide. I think I got that. The Nazi tabloid, The Attacker, propagated racial stereotypes of Jews. This poster advertising Der Stürmer stated that because the Jews are born criminals, they cannot laugh but can only twist their faces into a devilish grin. This stuff is like, I mean, it's horrible, but it's like, it's so stupid and silly. It's also sort of laughable. Charts like this one were used in German schools during the Nazi era to educate students about the various races of the earth. It identifies races in Europe and its border regions, such as the Nordic and Dinaric, I think is what it says. So there's that. I continue on here. This, by the way, I recommend people go to this National Holocaust Museum in D.C. I think you've got to see it. It's on the top of my list of things to see there. I'm glad I got to see it. It actually is basically free. There's a small handling fee. And you just have to have super fast internet to get tickets in time to do it. So it's a little tricky to get scheduled in because you got to do it and it sells out real fast. But we were able to do it because of my cousin Miguel. Shout out to Miguel. And it worked out. But, it could be tricky. Here, in regards to the Nuremberg laws, I just want to read this. As part of the efforts to inform the public of the complicated racial and legal distinctions between full Jew and first and second class mixed breeds, charts such as this were widely disseminated after the passage of the Nuremberg laws. And here's the Austrian Nazis celebrating union with Germany. So as part of the museum, obviously, it was the rise of Nazism within, first of all, within Germany itself, right? But then, obviously, as they reunify with Austria, where Hitler, of course, is from, here you have them celebrating. Because, nothing like a great, when Hitler comes to town, it's always a party, right? It's a reason to celebrate. The Nazis are here. Yay!
Now, the funny thing is, we got to be fair because, I like history. The Austrians that did not want the Anschluss, which is what it was called, some of them left. If you remember The Sound of Music, which is not accurate.
But the Von Trapp family.
The Von Trapp family were Austrian and did not favor the Anschluss. They just didn't return from a singing tour. Mm-hmm. I actually knew one of the Von Trapps I had met. They had their Von Trapp Lodge in Vermont.
That's pretty cool. Were they a good singer?
Oh, Rosemary did a great job.
I'll never forget. I know it's not one of their numbers, but Edelweiss, Edelweiss. Right? You know what I'm talking about?
I remember it.
Edelweiss. I guess that on the German soldiers' uniforms, if they had the Edelweiss flower, it meant they were like extremely brave or something. Because I think you had to climb to the top of a tree or get it or something. There was some story that I saw in Band of Brothers. They talked about it.
Okay,
but I forget what it was. But I'll never forget Edelweiss, Edelweiss. Edelweiss is actually a nationalistic song in the Third Reich. Look, so he's commenting on it. So is it like not a Nazi song? Is it like a Nazi song almost?
Well, it got kind of preempted. The Edelweiss is a flower that grows native to Austria. Kind of became like the national symbol. And then when the Nazis came in, of course, we can just preempt things. If you don't like history, just rewrite it.
Yeah, that's what these regimes love to do, isn't it, Jeff? Okay, so now, Jeff, we're going to get into the Night of Broken Glass. Before I open this up, can you say a little something about it?
Kristallnacht. It marks the real beginning of the... I don't want to say the beginning of the Holocaust, but it sort of does. It's like when it all becomes official.
Yeah, it's like, hey, this isn't just bothering people and reclassifying them and boycotting them. This is something a whole nother level. This is what this was all inching up towards, and now you knew what it was really about.
Yeah, the curtain gets pulled away at this point, and it's pretty clear.
So with that, Torah scrolls all over. I wonder if there's some like uber arch conservative like Hebrews who are like, this is horrible, how could you have these, or I wonder if they're okay with it because they understand it's a representation of what happened. I just wonder.
There hasn't been, I don't think, any backlash. The only thing I'll say is the loss of those scrolls is a loss for the Christian too.
Yes, because you lost Old Testament manuscripts.
That's exactly right. And so that's very important to point out, is that the preservation of those 5 books of Moses give us a larger number of Old Testament hand-copied accurate manuscripts of the Old Testament. So it's not just Jewish people that lost out.
Yeah.
It's anybody who wants there to be good, solid, hand-copied, reproduced manuscripts, and also they're copied in the same way. And so we learn a lot about scribal tradition because those scribal traditions haven't changed much.
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating, that part of what the Nazis wanted to do is go into synagogues and destroy Torah scrolls.
Well, and this is a thing that needs to be pointed out. Hitler didn't have much of a love for Christianity. He found it a useful tool.
Yeah, he was sort of Nietzschean in a way, that he viewed it as made Germans weak, which is what Nietzsche thought.
Yeah, he really didn't like Jesus because Jesus was a weak character to him. He died. He should have had the will to rule.
Yeah, if you look at like Nietzsche, and I know it's separate, I know it's not identical, but like Nietzsche had a problem with what he thought Christianity ultimately taught in that way, and instead wanted to have something that Hitler actually enacted, which is the Uberman, the German Superman, which is exactly what Hitler was trying to do. So this is really a turning point in the Night of Broken Glass. How would you describe the Night of Broken Glass? I know you're a turning point, but like November 9, 1938, what happened at this outbreak of violence?
Stores were smashed, stuff was destroyed, Torah scrolls were burned, stores were set on fire.
Cemeteries were desecrated.
Jewish people were beaten up or killed.
At least 91, it says
91.
Here. 25,000 arrested, sent to concentration camps. That's a substantial number. It's almost unbelievable, right? 25,000. Can you imagine that?
The other thing is, this is the turning point because Jews really can't leave very effectively now.
Yeah.
See, the time to get out would have been before Kristallnacht. Once Kristallnacht sets in, it really marks the point in which this is going to get ugly and violent.
Yeah, good point, Jeff. The focal point of every synagogue is the Torah. These fragments are from Torah's damage in Marburg and Vienna synagogues on the Night of Broken Glass. In the Vienna synagogue, Nazis cut up the Torah and threw the pieces into the street.
So yeah, again, what they're throwing into the street is preserved
God's word, man.
God's word.
Yeah, and they also showed how every synagogue has an ark, a sacred place where the Torah, a scroll of the Hebrew Bible, is safeguarded. This ark is from the synagogue in Nitzenhausen, a small town in Germany. On the Night of Broken Glass, Nazis defaced the inscription, which reads, "Know before whom you stand." So here in the synagogue, this says, and there's this inscription, "Know before whom you stand," and ironically, they defaced that. Kind of ironic, right?
It is ironic.
So they showed kind of like the graffiti and what they would do on the... See, that's it. You see that? They're defacing the Hebrew.
Yeah. No, what is kept, just so that you understand what is kept in the Ark is not the Talmud. It is a hand-copied scroll containing the 5 books of Moses, and there'll be a second scroll that contains the prophets called the Haftorah. And everybody who's ever been to a synagogue and knows their Bible and knows anything knows that. I mean, not like your audience doesn't, but I'm saying it's common knowledge.
Right.
Okay, it's not secret knowledge or something. It's available.
Now, Jeff, we talked about this in the car, but I said I didn't get any pictures of it. But as I'm watching this video, because it's a Torah door and it goes through on the other side, I realize on the other side of this Torah door that's been defaced, I got a video of something we talked about. Now, this is a little off topic because we're going to deviate from a second from Night and Broken Glass, but I don't want to forget this. Do you see what this is?
That looks like the SS Darius.
Yes. So I did get a little bit. Now I'm breezing through it. But can you talk a little about the SS Darius, the Voyage of the Damned?
The Voyage of the Damned. Hitler at one point said to the Jews, hey, look, the rest of the world won't take you. Either go. And
so hey, you guys are saying you want to get out of Germany? Okay, let's do a little experiment, Jews. You guys go ahead and get on the ship. I'll let you go. And guess what? The rest of the world won't take you either.
And that is essentially what happened.
Yep. Unfortunately, Hitler was prophetic on that element. It's sad.
Yeah, it is. And so that's the SS Darius.
And so it's a ship filled with, I don't know if you know the numbers. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head.
I don't know the numbers.
So it's filled with Jewish families and whatever. And I read about it here. They were saying at first there was a very relaxed atmosphere on board because they're like, hey, we're getting out of Germany. We're going to go. This is great. But then they pull up to the ports, and I think they went to Miami and they went to Cuba, I think.
The U.S. didn't give them admission either. Now, there's a story behind that.
Yeah.
It was not Roosevelt, but the State Department didn't like Jewish people. Roosevelt was unaware of what the State Department, or he just wasn't paying attention to what the State Department was doing, and it gets called to his attention by a gentleman named Morgenthau, who was the head of the Treasury, who he was close friends with. And I'm trying to think of whether the ship goes back to Germany or it sank. I think it may have actually sank with all hands on.
Yeah, does anyone in the live chat know the fate of... Because I see a brother here, Bible Care and Share Fellowship. He seems to know something about it. Just wonder if somebody knows what the final result was here. Oh yeah, I see. Because Judah the Lion saying it was the Talmud in there, not the Torah. See, Judah, I love you, bro, but I'm glad you're saying you thought it was and you're not being definitive about it, but now you know it wasn't, so I hope you don't repeat that mistake. It's the Torah, not the Talmud, and that's what was in the streets on the Night of Broken Glass. But here's the ship, and it's a shame that... now, I read that the captain, and you can see a little blurry picture of him there, he tried his best. I guess he was very patient. He wanted these people to be able to have safe refuge, but they did not. They did not have safe harbor. It's a real shame. Hey, shout out to Miss Titus, too, in the live chat. Everyone subscribe to her channel. She does some great work apologetics content. During the 1930s, the Nazis singled out various groups for persecution. Jews became their main target, but hundreds of thousands of others were oppressed as enemies of the state. Communists, social democrats, trade unionists, liberals, and pacifists were arrested for their political views or activities. Dissenting clergy face imprisonment if they spoke out against the regime, while Jehovah's Witnesses were persecuted for their refusal to swear allegiance to the state. Others were oppressed because the Nazis viewed them as sources of social, racial, or biological degeneration. Homosexuals were targeted because of their sexual orientation. Roma, gypsies, which they don't like that term, after 1939, Czechs, Poles, Slavic peoples from the Soviet Union were stigmatized as racially inferior and deemed threats to the German nation. The Nazis regarded mentally and physically, and talks about the disabled as well, and used a German phrase which is life unworthy of life.
Yeah, the Nuremberg laws basically called for the extermination of the handicapped.
Yeah. Useless eaters, I think is what they called them. Life unworthy of life. Now, I got to say something. Yeah, we're talking about the Holocaust, and there's not really many things very comparable to it. There are some. I think you can talk about the transatlantic slave trade and the atrocities there, and it was a longer period. But there's not a whole lot of things that are comparable to this in history. I'm not saying never. The Assyrian genocide. You know, someone's going to say, you left out this. I know. But with that being said, it's fascinating that there's an element of just this lack of concern for the reality of the image of God that all humans bear. And so you have this phrase, life worthy in life, useless eaters. And the U.S. did that to an extent with the black population. Now they essentially, when it comes to slavery, treated peoples of African descent as basically biological farm tools, right? Which is a horrible way to look at a person. But also, now in 2021, the unborn as well. And especially if you're unborn and they detect a genetic defect. Life unworthy of life. Organizations refusing to conform with Nazi ideology were destroyed. Most German organizations were quickly placed under Nazi control. Belonging to them was advisable, if not compulsory. Farmers were forcibly united in the Nationwide Association of Reich Food Producers. See, this is the socialism where you have, because remember, the Nazis were socialists. You have, essentially the state in charge of the means of production, which sometimes it gets confusing, like socialism and communism, where one begins and where one ends. But ironically, these socialists persecuted communists. And it seems like a lot of times they did so under the idea that basically all the Jews were communists. Sometimes I heard sort of stereotypes like that. I don't know. I'm still learning about that. Labor unions were replaced by the German Labor Front in 1934, acting in accordance with the Nazi leader principle. Soldiers in the German army swore allegiance not to the Constitution or to the state, but to Hitler personally. Even the Christian churches fell under Nazi influence, and many Protestant and Roman Catholic officials openly supported the regime. Now, I wish that statement wasn't true. I wish it was a slur, but it seems like there's a lot of truth to that statement, unfortunately. It's horrible. I hate to say it. Only the distant Protestant confessing church declared that unquestioning obedience to the state was not compatible with Christian faith. Comment on that?
Yeah, I do want to comment on that. The dissenting church was the church that Dietrich Bonhoeffer was involved with, and it was a major force the other direction. And if you read some of Bonhoeffer's writings, and I was actually challenged by them, The Cost of Discipleship is an incredible book. He basically and others said that the Christian principles or the principles of the scriptures did not allow them to give an unquestioning obedience to Hitler and to the state, and they paid dearly for it. So that's the counter. There were Protestant churches, Roman Catholic individuals, but there was a dissenting core of Bible Christians that really did not do this. So,
oh, man. Vocab, Judah Lion says, Vocab, you're well connected, huh? I think he's saying because I know someone who, from his understanding, calls himself a Jew, that I'm well connected. I don't know. Jeff's a cool guy, but he doesn't really strike me as a guy who himself is very well connected. Jeff's he's very smart. He knows a lot about everything. But in a lot of ways, he seems very blue collar, to say the least, right? Am I wrong? It's not a bad thing, right?
No, it's not a bad thing.
I mean, I remember, let me tell you how non-elitist Jeff is. And this may be why I reference to this day. We're at Talbot, and we're in our D-Min classes for the doctorate of ministry, right? And I remember Jeff would disagree or bring up different points about certain things, but he always did so in a very respectful and wise way. I was like, hey, I like this guy, man. He thinks really different than a lot of the rest of the class. This is pretty interesting to hear him. I like when he talks, because some of the other students, when they talk, to be honest, I would just be annoyed. You know what I'm saying? Just because you're in a D-Man program doesn't mean everyone, should be talking. Maybe half the time I shouldn't be talking. But anyway, so I'm listening. I'm like, oh, this guy's cool. I want to talk to him more. And then I hear he's from Glendale, Arizona. I'm like, what? From my neighborhood? Okay. And so I'm like, hey, man, you want to let's go get something to eat down at what was it called? The Eagles Talon or something?
It was called the Talon. The
Talon, okay, because the Biola is the Eagles. So I'm like, hey, let's go grab something down at the Talon. That was the little cafe below us, right? Not the main one, right?
Yeah, that was a little coffee shop, but they had some food.
So I'm like, and I think the way it went was like this. Jeff's like, well, I already got my lunch right here. I was like, well, hey, I'm paying. He's like, okay, I'm coming. So I learned the way I got Jeff to have lunch with me. He was going to sit in the room by himself and eat whatever sandwich he had. I don't know. Maybe he had some gefilte fish on him. And instead, I got him down there because I said, okay. Do you remember the story?
I remember sitting there.
Okay. From childhood, every stage of a German's life was dominated by the Nazi state. The Hitler Youth and the League of German Girls prepared young people for lifelong service to the party. Tours of duty in the Reich labor service and the army were obligatory for men. Ah, man, it's just, when you think about this. In 1933, Ludwig Mueller was appointed as Reich bishop with the mandate to unite all Protestant churches into a single Nazi-controlled organization. Wow. While most churches acquiesced to Nazi rule, they resisted unification. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the Nazis, sure. The Methodists, not so sure about them. This is a shame, right? What do you say, man? What do you say? What a horrible picture, right? Just a horrible picture. University students. I love this. When I saw this, I was like, I got to take a picture of this because I felt like it was a dig. I'm just gonna put my cards on the table. Sometimes how brainless college students and their ignorant arrogance can be. I love this little line, even though it's also sad. University students proved especially vulnerable to Nazi influence. Because I'm just thinking, the college kids are all like, yeah, this is the thing. Even before 1933, the National Socialist German Students League dominated student government at several universities. Berlin, December 11th, 1933. Yeah, no. The Hitler Youth was a vehicle for the regimentation and indoctrination of German boys. Membership in it became obligatory on March 25th, 1930. The date's not on there. But that's why sometimes you'll hear about someone, this doesn't have as much because most of these people are past. But I remember you would hear sometimes, oh, well, you can't trust that guy. He was in the Hitler Youth. Well, if they were in Germany at the time when they were a young man, that's all German boys had to be. It doesn't mean they acquiesced or agreed. If you lived there, that's what would happen, But look at this picture, man. It's like the evil Boy Scouts,
That's a pretty good. I like that kind of
comparison. Yeah, But do you want to say something about the Hitler Youth or any of those? Because I thought we talked a little bit about that in the car.
We did talk about that in the car. There was a book, I think it was Hansa. She was in the Hitler Youth and became a believer, and she wrote about the girl who loved the swastika, about her coming out of that into a solid Christian faith, and what that meant for her. Also, the Hitler Youth were the last ones fighting when they started to get ready to take Berlin.
Oh, yeah. They have that a little bit in Band of Brothers as well, where it's really sad, and the GIs kind of make these cavalier comments about it at first, and they're like, it's just old men and young boys, the older men at this point who are left, and these essentially young teens, and they show some scenes where these GIs, as they're getting closer and closer to Berlin, take out some squads of Germans, and they look at them, and it's like they basically just killed a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
And the GIs are like looking at it, just like, oh, this man, that's this, yeah. Miss Titus 2 says, I stand with Jeff. So that's cool. There you go. All right. Let's see. There's something else. Bonhoeffer had a coalition of churches that supported him. And it's funny because Bonhoeffer was a pacifist, and yet he got involved with a plot to assassinate Hitler. And so he ended up in a concentration camp himself, and he was there at the end. But right before Hitler was going to die, when he knew the Allied forces were going to get him and he was going to commit suicide, Bonhoeffer is one of the ones he ordered killed at that last kind of little time, right? That day. They wanted to get rid of certain people at that time, Let's see here. Okay. There was something else I wanted to see. Oh, what was the that title of that book you mentioned? It had a cool title. What was that?
Oh, I remember it being Hans. It was Hansi was the girl's name.
Yeah, but it was like something to the cross.
The girl who loved the swastika.
Oh, yeah. The girl who loved the swastika. Prisoners stand for roll call in the Buchenwald concentration camp as Hitler prepared Germany for war. Nazi repression grew more severe. Just after the night of broken glass, the total concentration camp population reached its pre-war high point of about 60,000. You know, I wonder, people that are Holocaust deniers, did they deny that Hitler targeted homosexuals? Did they deny that Hitler targeted sometimes black folks? Did they deny that, when I say Hitler, I mean the Nazi regime, whatever you want to say, targeted the mentally and physically handicapped, disabled? Did they? I just wonder if they denied
No,
that as
I
well.
actually knew a gentleman who was a Holocaust denier. I think he's doing some time in Germany right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Generally not. And in all fairness, one of the coolest things was Jesse Owens winning the gold
Oh, in 1938 Olympics?
1938, and he has to receive the award, and he's in Berlin.
Yeah.
And Hitler can't stand him because he's not Aryan, and yet he takes the gold.
Yeah, so the idea was Hitler had been building up everything, and a big part of it was German Aryan supremacy. And the idea is we're going to show the world, you know, by winning all these medals at the Olympics, whatever, you know, our athletes are going to dominate. And then, and so it was a big thing. It was like a big propaganda tool was supposed to happen. And then Jesse Owens from Columbus, Ohio, black gentleman in the United States, Columbus, Ohio, he came in and wrecked shop. And Hitler was obviously quite upset. And this is in Berlin. Hitler's got to watch Jesse Owens just wipe the floor with not only his guys, but you know, everyone else. And Hitler's later explanation is, well, people of African descent are more animalistic, so they have an advantage in those areas.
Oh, I hadn't heard his excuse.
Yeah, I heard there was an excuse like, well, they're more like animals, so they can run fast, was what they end up, my understanding of what they end up saying. Because they had to come up, why did they get their butts kicked by Jesse Owens and stuff, right? Here, D News says, I love footage of that Jesse Owens Hitler clip. Jesse Owens decimated the field. Yeah, it's, oh, well, let me make sure the comment can be seen. Sorry about that, D New. Looks like we have a pretty educated audience today, man, with a few exceptions. A few exceptions, right? Okay, so check this out. Catholic priests were among the main targets of Nazi mass murders in Poland. Here, priests and teachers from the city of Vocab await execution, September 39. There's an interesting movie when the Nazis came into Italy, because they kind of viewed the Italians as kind of incompetent, and they're like, we're going to run stuff. The Vatican City was kind of supposed to be walled off from the Nazis, right? The little Vatican area, but they were basically everywhere else. And there's an interesting story of a guy who worked at the Vatican who basically helped Jews escape through kind of those mild shielding that Vatican City had. And I think it was Gregory Peck that was in the movie. And I think it was called The Scarlet and the Gray or The Scarlet and the Black. Could someone look that up? Look up Gregory Peck, Scarlet and the Black. That is a really, really good movie. And I guess it's based on a true story and stuff.
Yeah, and understand that the Catholic Church was in a weird position because there were individual priests. I remember there was a town in France that was a Catholic town that hid Jews. The problem was that early on, in order to avoid trouble, the Pope signed a concord with Hitler. And so there were individual priests like this that dissented the action, but the Pope was trying to kind of protect the Catholic Church and felt that was the best way to protect the Catholic Church.
Yeah, isn't there a thing where they say I don't know if this is true, Hitler's picture was up in the Vatican?
Yeah, that I don't know.
Oh man, someone in the comment, like I said, we have very educated people in the live chat, and it looks like I just got corrected. Where'd the comment go? Kenneth, I think Owens was Cleveland by way of Alabama. Kenneth is right. I just looked it up. I thought Jesse Owens was from Columbus. I think it's because they named some streets after him in Columbus, or he had some ties. I forgot what the details were. I thought he was from Columbus. I hadn't looked into it like that, but it looks like he's from Cleveland. But it looks like he's born in Alabama, but it looks like he's going to spend his youth in Cleveland, which is an inferior Ohio city. But at least it's Ohio, not Michigan, like where Carm's from. So that's okay. But thank you, Kenneth, for all right. What's the name of the movie? I think it's The Scarlet and the Black. Let me look it up here.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that.
Hey, Google, tell me about the movie Scarlet and the Black.
The Scarlet and the Black is a 1983 movie directed by Jerry London, starring Gregory Peck, Christopher Plummer, and John Gielgud. Do you want to hear the plot or some facts about this movie?
Yes.
Here's the plot. Defying a Nazi colonel, Vatican Monsignor Hugh O'Flaherty hides thousands of escaped POWs in occupied Rome. Do you want to hear some facts about this movie?
Yes. Pals.
The Scarlet and the Black scored 7.6 out of 10 on IMDb.
Oh, hey Google, shut
If
up.
you'd like to
Hey Google, shut up. Hey Google, what is a Jew?
Sorry, I don't understand.
Hey Google, what is a Jewish person?
According to Wikipedia, Jews or Jewish people are members of an ethno-religious group in a nation originating from the Israelites and Hebrews of historical Israel and Judah.
Hey Google, tell me a joke about Jews.
Jews? I don't know.
He already did.
Yeah.
He already did.
Hey,
Jews?
I just want to see. Hey Google, tell me a joke.
What do you call a shoe made out of a banana? A slipper.
Sorry, we're going down the raft. We're going down the black hole on this one.
You're going a far afield here.
You start off asking about, the Vatican rescuing Jews, and you end up with jokes about banana peels. Okay. Anyways, Scarlet and the Black or whatever, and that is a good movie. It is a very good movie. Black Atheist says he's setting off my Google devices. Oh, yeah, actually, Michael, I think you can. Google, can you do a freestyle rap? Hey, Google, can you rap?
I can't really rap, but I can rhyme. Here's my ode to search. I love to search, I cannot lie. I'll search it all, I am not shy. Search for pictures, search for pie. I search, at least I try.
And I keep track of everything you do. All right, okay. Sorry. So back to the serious stuff at hand. To prevent the reemergence of a national leadership and culture, in a top-secret memorandum of March 25, 1940, SS leader Heinrich Himmler advised, quote, for the non-German population of the East, there must be no school higher than the 4th grade of elementary school. The sole goal of this schooling is to teach them simple arithmetic, writing one's name, and the doctrine that is the divine law to obey the Germans. I do not think that reading is desirable. So they want them to be able to read enough to know this, the doctrine that it is the divine law to obey the Germans. Guided by such goals, the Nazis closed Polish universities and many secondary schools and killed or imprisoned thousands of teachers, professors, and priests. Fascinating. Here's this famous quote. Have you heard about this quote in relationship to Hitler saying, who, after all, remembers the Armenians getting slaughtered?
Oh, I think I have heard.
Let's see. I want to look this up. I want to show, because I thought this was a fascinating thing. Are you guys ready for this? Okay. This is from Hitler, right? Chancellor of Nazi Germany, speaking August 22nd, 1939. And listen to what he says here. You ready? I have issued the command. Oh, wow. Let me read a little bit more of this. This is interesting to hear Hitler's words like this, right? Our strength consists in our speed and in our brutality. Imagine a national leader saying that. Genghis Khan led millions of women and children to slaughter with premeditation and a happy heart. History sees him solely the founder of a state. It's a matter of indifference to me what a weak Western European civilization will say about me. I have issued the command, and I'll have anybody who utters but one word of criticism executed by a firing squad, that our war aim does not consist in reaching certain lines, but in the physical destruction of the enemy. Accordingly, I have placed my death head formations in readiness, for the present only in the East, with orders to them to send to death mercilessly and without compassion men, women, and children of Polish derivation and language. Only thus shall we gain the living space which we need. Who, after all, speaks today of the annihilation of the Armenians? Of the Armenians, I pronounced it wrong. But,
that would be a little different.
That day has yet to come. But the Armenians, he's talking about what happened to the Assyrians, Armenians, and the Greeks as well. Here's the murder of the handicapped. Physically and mentally disabled persons were the first victims of systemic murder by the Nazis. And again, I wonder if Holocaust deniers deny what happened to the Polish, They deny what happened to the handicapped, and they deny those things as well. So they gassed to death more than 70,000 in one example. Those who were handicapped. Operation T4 is an example of that. They transported them essentially to killing centers in psychiatric clinics, and then they briefly medically examine them. And then 15 to 20 of them, they put them in a hermetically sealed place, and they would put in carbon monoxide and then burn their corpses. Some were killed by lethal injection. Yes. Ugh. And have you seen this quote? Today I will once more be a prophet. If the international Jewish financiers in and outside Europe should succeed in plunging the nations once more into a world war, then the result will not be the Bolshevizing of the earth and thus the victory of Jewry, but the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe. Saying, hey, if you guys start an international war like you always do, this time you're going to get slaughtered. You're going to be wiped out entirely. 400 ghettos. These are the ghettos in Eastern Europe. By the summer of 1942, over 400 ghettos of varying sizes had been established throughout German-occupied Eastern Europe. More than 2 million Jews and over 8,000 Roma were confined to them. In all the ghettos, severe overcrowding, terrible sanitary conditions, and starvation were the norm. The earliest ghettos were set up in Poland in 1939 before the beginning of the final solution. In the Soviet Union, most ghettos were established in the summer and autumn of 1941 after the first massacres of Jews had taken place. In Vilna, Lithuania, the Germans created 2 ghettos in early September of that year after thousands of Jews had already been shot to death at Ponary, a mass extermination site in a wooded area outside the city. The largest ghettos included those of Warsaw, Lodz, Sosnowiec, and Borysa in Poland, Minsk in Belarus, Kamenev in Vilna in Lithuania, and Riga in Latvia. They were closed, sealed off from the outside world with high walls or fences and barbed wire. Sign passes were required to enter or leave, with armed guards stood at entrances and exits. Want to say something about the ghetto?
Yeah, the term ghetto really doesn't start with the African American population. The term ghetto goes back to Italy when Jews in the diaspora ended up settling in Italy from Israel as part of the diaspora and lived in their own neighborhoods. Now, that doesn't take anything away from the experience of African American black brothers and sisters. I'm just saying that the term has an origin that goes back far before anything in this country. It's a very old term. In fact, if you look at it, it looks kind of Italian as a term.
Yeah, it's interesting when you see it, because nowadays most people will use it in a certain context, but that's how the context began. And here you have, these big posters. You got examples of, there's different ways that they were killing people, and sometimes it was like this, and they would make people dig their own graves. Here's the Warsaw Jews, monoxide gas, and they start talking then about the trains. You want to talk a little about the trains?
Well, they basically, there was no water, there was no nothing. They just cattle card people, way too many in a train. And these trains usually weren't going 5 or 10 miles down the road. We were talking about a major trip, and they had set up the concentration camps. And what they would do is they would train transport the folks to the concentration camps. You'd be in this dark, enclosed place with no place with facilities.
But I think they just told them they're relocating them or something like that.
That was the thing that was given, and over the camps, it said basically the idea that, like, if you work, you'll live, so that it looked almost more like it was a work camp,
right,
than that it was an extermination camp.
Right. The ramp, place called the ramp, where the trains with the Jews are coming in day and night, sometimes 1 per day, sometimes 5 per day, all sorts of places all over the world. This is someone who escaped there. Saw the transports rolling one after another, seen at least 200 of them. I've seen it so many times it became routine. Constantly, people from the heart of Europe were disappearing, and they were arriving at the same place, same ignorance of the fate of the previous transport. I knew that within a couple hours after they arrived there, 90% would be gassed.
Yeah, they would separate out folks and figure out who was going to go. Actually, some folks just went right to the gas chamber. Now, what they told them is they were going to get a shower. As this was sanitary. You're going to get a shower, as if we were delicing you, and and the whole thing, and they would be brought into the showers, which weren't really showers. That's why that elevator was really creepy.
Yeah.
And then they would just put Cyclone B through the gas heads.
And there's at the museum, you can like go into one of these train cars. You can like walk through it, you know. And it was weird. It's like, you know, there's a lot of places where I stopped and I looked at stuff. Man, when that part, I just like kind of walked right through it. I didn't really want to, you know. And then here's these little markings they would give to different prisoners. Marking for prisoners in concentration camps, shape and color markings. So you got political, career criminal, immigrant, Jehovah's Witnesses, homosexual, antisocial. I kind of thought that one was funny. And then you have here badge for Jews. So theirs would be different with a 6-point star. And of course, there was the pink triangle that was designated for homosexuals, which later became kind of a designation of some of what became known as the gay rights movement. The pink triangle. I don't know if you see it as much anymore, but that was like a thing for a while.
It is weird what people pick for symbols.
Yeah.
Sometimes they pick symbols that if they knew the history of, they wouldn't be so anxious.
Here is the last bit of slides I got, and this is one of the things I mentioned earlier. Let's take a look at this here. This man's fascinating. I'm going to bring this up and read it here. Wilhelm Brasi was forced to photograph tens of thousands of prisoners for camp records while at Auschwitz, and you can see it on the side there. A professional photographer, he was arrested for attempting to flee German-occupied Poland. Brasi was twice offered his freedom under the condition he renounce his Polish nationality. He was eligible for German citizenship because his father was Austrian, but he refused. Towards the end of the war, guards ordered Brasi and a fellow photographer to burn every photo. So this is important. You hear this? But listen to this, everyone. Their secret defiance of these orders saved 38,916 photographs, now indelible evidence of Nazi crimes.
Quick question. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I would turn a comment around that's here, which was my friend here, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time with Judah. I would just say, no, it's the other way around. How did your people end up in ghettos using the same terminology that my people ended up in ghettos? So let's just get our history right. And go back to Roman records and other things and Hebrew scrolls and the passing down of Hebrew from Jewish people to Jewish people. And that's all I'm going to say about that. We can move on. I don't want to get caught in that, but it was just a weird twist of history to put, 1900s in America and move it before medieval Italy.
Right. Denture fragments found at the Kinmo Killing Center. So, you gas someone up, you burn them, and sometimes this is all that's left.
Well, no, they used parts. Yeah. The hair was made into clothing. The skin was made into
lampshades.
Oh, yeah, lampshades.
Imagine using human skin for a lampshade. But I guess the idea is the Nazis were like hyper efficient and trying to save money everywhere or something like that.
They figured we got it. We might as well use it.
These starved Soviet prisoners of war were worked to exhaustion at Melk, a subcamp of Malthusen, digging tunnels for underground war production factories. They were photographed at Malthusen on September 21st, 1944, unable to work any longer. They were killed there on September 25th and 26th. So they would just pretty much starve you, then you work, and then once you can't work anymore because you're not being fed, they kill you.
Yeah.
Now, these are Soviet prisoners of war. I just want everyone to understand this particular picture. But there was tons of pictures like this, of course, of Jewish folks as well and all that stuff. But from time to time, women would suddenly give the most terrible shrieks while undressing, or tear their hair, or scream like maniacs. These were immediately led away behind the building and shot in the back of the neck with a small caliber weapon. Rudolf Haas, SS Commandant of Auschwitz, Post-War Memoirs, 1947. Well, I guess I should comment on that. This is when they were undressing for the gas showers. This is what he's referring to there. Here's Dr. August Hirt, director of the Strasbourg University Institute of Anatomy, requesting the gassing. So here's a doctor who was requesting the gassing of 86 Jews for anatomical research. So, hey, can you get me 86 and get them over here and do some study on them? Again, you got a real live trade in baby parts in America right now, where certain companies, for different reasons, biomedical companies, whatever, they will talk to Planned Parenthood, tell them what body parts they need. And Planned Parenthood will perform the abortion in a certain manner so as to preserve the required body part from the baby. Then, since you can't charge someone for dead baby parts, I mean, even just saying that is very harrowing. Planned Parenthood will charge like a service or a handling fee or something like that, which is essentially paying for the brain or the heart, because the service or handling fee is greater or lesser depending on what the part you're shipping is. And this is what, how do you say his name? David Dettelin, the Roman Catholic activist, discovered this with all these secret tapes. He was interviewing these Planned Parenthood folks, and it all came out over salad and drinks. This is exactly what they're doing, and you can hear it and see it, and they literally talk about it. And you know what? He was in California while she was I think the AG of the state. Our current vice president, Harris, had the cops go in and confiscate all the tapes, all the video footage at David's house. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but sometimes, we can see the evil in Nazis, but we got to see the evil maybe in our own society as well. Here's some victims of medical experiments in Auschwitz. So, they would take off their civilian clothing as soon as they could, and they would give them these uniforms, these black and white stripes. And you see, here's an example where, I guess some Germans had been killed or something in some situation. And so they did a mass hanging of a bunch of folks in the prison camp there together. So this, Jeff, is a pile of shoes. We are the shoes. We're the last witnesses. We are shoes from grandchildren and grandfathers, from Prague, Paris, and Amsterdam. And because we are only made of fabric and leather and not of blood and flesh, each one of us avoided the hellfire. Powerful poem. Look at that, Jeff.
Yeah, again, clothing would be reused. Just to let people know, the fillings of the teeth, if there were gold fillings, very handy to get the gold out of the teeth.
I mean, you see this? Bags of hair from rivals there at Nazi camps, killing sinners, was sold very cheaply to private firms. So someone's always willing to make a buck off human suffering, kind of like now, kind of like slavery, kind of like abortion, which used it to make felt slippers, bumpers for boats, and stuffing for mattresses. At liberation, Soviet troops found these bags of hair. Imagine wearing slippers made of human hair.
Yeah, that's disturbing.
And here, Jeff, is the cover image. This is a reproduction, of course, right? Disposing of the victims' remains. The unprecedented scale of Nazi mass murder resulted in vast numbers of corpses that had to be disposed of. Initially, the SS forced the victims to dig their own graves at the killing fields. Inside the camps, bodies were dumped in pits. At some of the killing centers and concentration camps, the SS constructed special crematoria to reduce the bodies to ashes. As early as 1942, the SS ordered the systematic exhumation and incineration of hundreds of thousands of bodies buried in mass graves to remove traces of the crimes. So they try to dig them up, basically, and burn them. The photograph, right, was taken clandestinely in August 1944 when Crematorium 5 at Auschwitz, Birkenau, broke down under the strain of burning thousands of bodies. So they burned so many bodies, Jeff, one of them broke.
Yeah.
Corpses had to be burned in open pits instead. And in the rear castings of thousands crematorium ovens, a stretcher that moved the corpses into the ovens, and a crematorium poker.
Now there was a disgusting amount of like really rancid, disgusting smoke that the cities around could like see. I'm not blaming those folks. I'm saying this produced, particulates in the air that were quite unpleasant.
Yeah. 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 That's the last slide that I've got from the Holocaust Museum there in Washington, D.C., because I saw some people saying, where is this place? So that's at a Holocaust Museum there in Washington, D.C., and I think we learned a lot from looking through those. Now, I didn't I didn't get everything on there. I was able to get some stuff, but I thought it was good for us to offer some commentary. Jeff, I'd like you to offer final words. I really appreciated you being on, your insight, your knowledge, everything. Subscribe to Jeff Cran's YouTube channel. You can tell him briefly about ministry and stuff, and then offer some final comments, and we'll get out of here, my friend.
All right. Well, got a channel. In fact, some of the folks up there, like D New, threw it up there. Few folks did. And so I encourage you, come on, hit the subscribe button. As far as final words, you took some really great shots with a lot of history behind them. Going to visit Yad Vashem was like this, but on like steroids. I thought through what persecution would look like for us. I remember talking to the guy who took us on the tour, who was a dear friend, evangelist, Bible teacher, and said, I don't know if I can handle that sort of experience. It was just very shocking to me. And the other shocking thing was the school textbooks, where kids were getting fed this in with their mathematics. I mean, they didn't know what they were getting fed.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, what would be something we should say as far as Christians? How do you end in hope? Because I can say this, that one really cool thing is as you leave out of the Holocaust Museum, right? It's very dark lit the whole time. The emphasis is on the displays. And as you're leaving, then what happens is you go into this light room that's very different than everything else. No pictures and all that, but there's this burning like flame there, and it's very light. And then there's Bible passages about life and different things throughout. And there wasn't a lot of Old Testament passages throughout the place, but there was at the end. And I thought it was very hopeful climax the way they ended the Holocaust Museum. I thought it was wonderful. I love that aspect of it. You go, there's the scripture, there's a sense of openness and hope, and hopefully moral progress for the future, I think, is the way they're trying to frame it. Now, when I see those verses, I think about, the triune God's activity in the world. I think of Christ redeeming people. I think of the triune God setting everything right at the end,
Well, and that's the one thing I would say is that God got the last word, not Hitler.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's a good thing to keep track of. The 1,000-year Reich, that's what Hitler pictured, a 1,000-year regime. That's what the word Reich means. Didn't last anywhere close to 1,000 years.
Yep. That's exactly right. And I would just say, if you go to D.C., there's a lot to see there. Museum of the Bible is number one to me. This is number two. When I'm thinking from like a, apologetic type of interest, especially, obviously history of America, there's all kinds of whatever. But I would say Museum of the Bible, and then this. I'm going to try to go back by God's grace one day and see some other stuff, and I'll give you guys updates on that as well. But it's in D.C. Check it out. And very well done. I love the verses that they had there. There's some good resources in the bookstore. There was some resources in the bookstore that I'll just say I wish weren't there, that I think muddied up the picture a little bit. But there was some good as well, specifically the movie based upon the book that was based on a court trial in the UK about a Holocaust denier. Maybe close with that. Shout out to Alex S for the super chat. I think you're the only one of the day.
It's called Denial. And it was a Holocaust denier that brought suit against a professor of Holocaust studies. I forgot which university her name was. I remember her name, but it was just interesting because I learned a lot about British law. And by the way, British law is different when it comes to slander and libel than U.S. law.
Right.
So, great movie. If you find it on like Netflix or something, and you want to watch a really good movie, Denial is a good choice.
And to everyone, check it out. On my Instagram account, I actually have more pictures from the Holocaust Museum, but my phone broke, so I had to get this new phone, and I haven't been able to access the old ones yet. So my point is, follow me on Instagram to hopefully see the rest of the pictures that I've got from the Holocaust Museum. Because I have pictures from this room, for example, and some shots in the bookstore, for example. And I haven't been able to post them yet. That's why we didn't go over them, and I don't have access to them yet. I'm trying to get them off this old phone, like I said. So just Instagram.com/vocabmalone, you can see those as well, because we probably won't do another show on this, so you wouldn't be able to see them. So that's that, and that's it, man. Thank you very much, Jeff. We had a great time.
My pleasure.
Now it's time for me to go get my spumani.
Haha.
Come check us out tomorrow. The plan, by God's grace, is to go live tomorrow night as well. That's what we're working on right now. Not Jeff and I, but we'll see what's up with all that. But for now, we're going to take off. Thank you for joining Street Apologists Live, where we try to make apologetics fun again. Peace out. Shalom.
Turn your radio up. Whoa. Radio time. Whoa. You're now listening to Street Apologists. Street Apologists. Street Apologists. Street Apologists.